Have you ever wondered why brilliant leaders transform into monsters? Not the obviously evil ones, but those who genuinely believe they're humanity's saviors, while making decisions that destroy everything they touch. Think about it. Every tyrant started as someone's golden child. Every corrupt CEO once had revolutionary ideas. Every fallen politician believed they were changing the world. The terrifying truth? They never stopped believing. 500 years ago, an Italian diplomat cracked the code. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't just study power. He dissected its psychology. He mapped how authority rewires the human brain, how it severs leaders from reality. Modern neuroscience has proven him right with disturbing precision. This isn't about politics. It's about the psychology of power itself. Picture Rome's most promising emperor. Nero ascended the throne as culture's darling. Artists adored him. Citizens praised his reforms. Tax cuts flowed like wine. The empire seemed reborn. Then something shifted. The same man who expanded civil rights began executing critics. The cultural patron murdered his own mother. The people's champion kicked his pregnant wife to death. While Rome burned, he composed poetry. This wasn't sudden madness. It was gradual intoxication. Howard Hughes followed the same trajectory. Brilliant aviator turned reclusive, paranoid. Visionary filmmaker became corporate dictator. His empire crumbled while he battled invisible enemies. The pattern repeats across centuries, because power doesn't corrupt randomly. It corrupts systematically, with mathematical precision. Success becomes their drug. Praise becomes their reality. Opposition becomes treason against divinity itself. Machiavelli witnessed Renaissance princes rising and falling. He wasn't writing a tyrant's manual. He was documenting a psychological transformation. His insight cuts to the bone. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This isn't about image management. It's about reality distortion. Authority creates an asymmetrical relationship with truth. The higher you climb, the more people see only your performance, your confident presentations, your decisive moments, your curated success. They rarely witness your doubts, your confusion, your failures. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. The successful, decisive leader becomes your only identity. Your private struggles disappear. Your public persona becomes your truth. But Machiavelli identified something more sinister. Leaders attract people who want to believe their version of reality. Employees who need approval. Advisors who profit from success. Media who gain access through flattery. Until you're surrounded by mirrors, all reflecting the same beautiful lie. Modern science validates Machiavelli's observations. With brain scans and neuromapping, Dr. Sukhvinder Obi's research reveals the biological truth. Power physically rewires your brain. It reduces activity in empathy circuits. It impairs social cognition. It literally makes you less human. The very act of wielding authority changes your neural architecture. You become less capable of understanding others, less aware of how you're actually perceived. This isn't moral weakness. It's biological transformation. Unlike ordinary people who face reality checks, leaders can manufacture supportive information. They hire consultants who confirm biases. They fund research that supports positions. They create media ecosystems that validate worldviews. From the inside, this feels rational. But you're constructing an alternate reality where you're always right, where critics are always wrong. Look at Enron's executives. Years of being called visionaries, treated like geniuses, celebrated as innovators. They genuinely believed their fraud was innovation. Their lies became their truth. Their crimes became their achievements. By the end, they saw critics as enemies of progress. This is a foundational pathology. Power severs the feedback mechanisms that anchor minds to reality. The transformation follows predictable stages. First, you select advisors who make you feel brilliant. Then, you dismiss those who challenge assumptions. Finally, you surround yourself with people who compete to validate ideas. Remember Caligula declaring himself a god, making his horse a consul. Senators worshipped him while he descended into madness. In his mind, they weren't being unreasonable. They were recognizing divine logic. Critics simply couldn't grasp the wisdom of a living deity. Machiavelli warned about another psychological trap, the deadly paradox of needing to be loved while wielding power. Research by Dan Ariely exposes the mechanism. People who see themselves as fundamentally ethical become more likely to engage in dishonesty. They rationalize transgressions as exceptions. For leaders, this amplifies exponentially. Their entire authority rests on being perceived as morally superior. When that image gets threatened, they defend their identity. Lance Armstrong exemplifies this transformation. His identity was built on being an inspirational cancer survivor. When doping allegations emerged, he didn't just lie. He systematically destroyed accusers' lives. In his mind, he wasn't protecting his reputation. He was protecting his ability to inspire cancer patients worldwide. The greater good justified any means. This creates ethical fading. You cover up mistakes to protect your ability to do good. You silence critics to prevent them from undermining noble work. Successful leaders lose their balance with fortune and circumstance. They begin believing they control outcomes that are largely random. Daniel Kahneman calls this the illusion of control. Most people encounter frequent failures that limit this bias. But successful leaders have fewer such encounters. When most decisions appear to work out well, you attribute success to superior judgment rather than favorable circumstances. When things go badly, you blame external interference. This creates systematically distorted understanding of cause and effect, making you increasingly reckless over time. Consider Elon Musk's trajectory. Early successes convinced him his intuition was superior to expert analysis. When experienced executives questioned ambitious timelines, he dismissed concerns as lack of vision. His confidence was so compelling that investors and media sided with optimism over expertise, until reality eventually imposed its corrections. Prudent risk management becomes perceived cowardice. Accepting limitations feels like surrendering to mediocrity. As psychological distortions accumulate, they trigger the most dangerous extreme, the transformation into paranoid authoritarians, who view normal opposition as existential threats. When you've lost touch with normal social feedback, criticism feels like personal warfare. This perception isn't entirely wrong. Once you've surrounded yourself with sycophants, people who still dare oppose you often are genuinely hostile. But this creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your increasing authoritarianism provokes legitimate resistance, which confirms your paranoid interpretation, which justifies even more extreme responses. Joseph Stalin embodied the spiral. He didn't start as a paranoid tyrant. He began as a true believer in revolution, but power isolated him until fear hardened into paranoia. Critics weren't just wrong. They were enemies who deserved destruction, until no one dared appear disloyal. Today's technology has amplified Machiavelli's warnings exponentially. Modern, powerful people can construct entire media universes. They fund research institutions that produce favorable studies. They deploy social media campaigns that amplify support while drowning out criticism. But the psychological trap remains identical. Systems built to convince others end up convincing their creators. Social media algorithms make this particularly dangerous. They show you increasingly extreme versions of what you already believe. For powerful people who can customize their information diet, it creates complete detachment from reality. Many tech leaders have convinced themselves they're saving humanity, while building systems that exploit psychological vulnerabilities for profit. They consume content that frames their work as visionary innovation, while filtering out information about harmful effects. The result is a class of leaders simultaneously more informed and more deluded than any in history. 5 centuries after Machiavelli, his insights have become more relevant, not less. The fundamental lesson isn't that powerful people are evil. It's that power itself is psychologically corrupting in predictable ways. Every person who achieves significant influence faces the same psychological pressures. The solution isn't avoiding power. We need to approach it with systematic caution. This means building institutions that preserve reality contact, even when leaders don't want it, creating cultures that reward intellectual humility and punish arrogant certainty. But perhaps most importantly, Recognizing that responsibility doesn't rest solely with leaders themselves. Everyone who interacts with powerful people plays a role. We either enable their self-deception or help them stay grounded. The price of good leadership is eternal vigilance, not just against external threats, but against the internal psychological forces that transform protectors into predators. Understanding what Machiavelli saw may be our best hope for building institutions worthy of the power we invest in them.